Hello everyone, so today I'm featuring 15 cards made from one paper pad, one ephemera pack, and then we have, some bling and things that we've added in. But basically one pad, and this I bought in a Joann haul a while back. I do have a video, I can try to link that, just showing it, but basically they were on a ridiculous sale and I picked up a few things, and these kind of already coordinate. So you can do this with really any paper pad and any embellishments that you have. But this video is going to kind of focus on a lot of tips and tricks and different ways to build cards easily. And I have a few resources to mention. One of them, I have my own little record. If I make a card and I just love it, and it'd be good to write down like where the idea came from, if it just came out of my head or not. I don't know that I've done that, but I've taken a photo of cards that I've made in the past, and then I made my own little sketch so that I could recreate it easily without the same stuff. And so I have just a photo album with pictures of cards, and then I have like the basic sketch on there. And then there are multiple websites that will offer free access to card sketches, and so I have a bunch of cards made from some printed out pages of sketches. This is my favorite things. Let me see if I can read that. www.mftstamps.com. And hopefully all of that's still accurate because I printed these out a long time ago. And then another one that I've got a lot of are sketches from OWH, operationwritehome.org. And that's HTTP, the dots, the lines, operationwritehome.org. I will try to include those in the description as well. All right, for the first two cards, this is the basic card sketch that I was inspired by. And I've got two versions, so you can see how I've taken paper from the pad and changed things, because this one has a wider border, and that's what you can do with the sketch is, lay it out and maybe change a few things. These are both the same basic sketch. We have, background, and then we have kind of a focal piece here with and then we have the main focal image here. And we want to focus on balance. So there's kind of 3 tips every card should have. I feel like it should have color harmony. Now when you're working with a paper pad, basically they've already done the hard work on the color harmony. So you can choose pretty much anything in here. Sometimes I think things look better than others, but they're all designed to go together. And then you want visual balance. I'm getting out of frame. That's not very balanced. And so basically, if you want to draw attention to one part of the card, you might have more stuff there, and that's okay. But everything else should be kind of balanced. Your eye wants to move around and land here. I hope that's making sense. And then you want a focal point or a message. Those are my 3 basic things that I want in every card. And so for this one, we have the place here, but then we also have this on the other side, because that's my main point, is the hello. That's my sentiment. This one doesn't have a sentiment, so the eye is just staying here, and that's the beautiful focal point. Okay, the next 2 cards, I used this sketch for a reference. We have the background, a large square rectangle, that's probably a rectangle, a smaller rectangle, and then a strip. And there are measurements here. I don't know if those are accurate. I have 2 versions of that as well. And for the card bases, I just used kind of paper from my stash that went well with the colors. So I kind of picked and chose. So this one, we have, this rectangle's larger than this one, but it's still the same basic idea. Big rectangle, smaller rectangle, which in this case is in fact a square. And then we have the focal message and image is here with the sentiment, and a little bit of balance here with just a couple little stickers, bling, that sort of thing. And then here we have a focal image, and then the balance on the bottom there because you got a lot going on here. We're balancing out all of this pattern and stuff with the sentiment here, and it's also a secondary focal point. But the focal images, you know, all the focal where you want the eyes to go is here on the right of the card. Now, on the same sheet, I had another sketch that I used. This one right here. I do like to use this technique where I have two papers, especially if I have one that I like the image more, one that stands out more. I have that one in front and then maybe a background coordinating paper that just is staggered behind. And so for this sketch, we have our card base, we have a large rectangle here, and then these are the focal, and that's, I'm assuming, the sentiment there. And here is how I made that. And I've got some stickers. These stickers came from this bow bunny sticker. It's not necessarily go with it, but it coordinates well enough. And then I use two different pattern papers here, but I think it goes. And then I just have a little bit of balance to all that's going on the right of the card with these stickers here. Sometimes if you're looking at it and you're like, something's off, maybe it's just that you need a little something on the other side to balance. And a lot of times those little embellishments, dots, things can be just the right thing to have that visual balance. Now this next card comes from this little sketch, and this is an old favorite where you have a square and I just round two of the corners. I love to use that. So we've got a background panel, a little sentiment strip, and then three images here on the right, which could be a variety of ways. This is how I've worked it out in this card. And this is a great one for the scraps if you have a paper pad with smaller pieces. So I've got, what are these? I've gone with a 1 1/4 inch square on these three squares, and then I've rounded the corners, and I wanted them to pop out from this background paper a little bit, and that's why I've added the white underneath for a little border, and I mimicked the rounded corner on each of them. And then we have a nice bit of bling because the sticker I wanted to use, which was from my stash, says thankful, and it had some gold, and that's why I brought in the gold. So that's another visual balance, is having more than one of the color somewhere, repeating it. Unless it's your main focal image, you kind of want it not to be the only thing on the card. And so we've got the colors balanced, the gold is balanced with this gold here. And then I just added, since it was like a planner sticker, I don't know if you can tell, I added some, what is this stuff? Like crystal drops. And there's a bunch of different companies that make something that adds just a little bit of, it mimics also this kind of epoxy look of the sticker. That is that card. Okay, now this one we have sketch here that has a couple basic rectangles and some strips, and this whole cluster is your focal point of the card. Here is how I have arranged it. I had this card base. This is another great one for using some scraps, because you can see here I've got two strips of paper, and they do have a pattern, but they're not too much. And I think I got away with it because this background rectangle has kind of a subtle pattern. It's this kind of a beige, and so it doesn't compete too much. And you can just visually decide what's, you know, what you like in that way. And again, this rectangle here is not plain, and I like that it's not too plain, but it's not also a really loud it's like the butterflies would be a lot more. That would be jumping out. And I've used a little bit of dimension here with foam to help it stand out, and then found this in my word scraps and also used the dimensional puffy stuff on there too. And then that's my focal point, my sentiment, and again I just added a little bling here. Alright, I think this is our last card made from this big card sketch. Just a couple basic rectangles here, and then here you could be using strips of paper. You could use a wider rectangle and one strip. There's a variety of ways, but that goes through the center of the card there. And so here is what I did. I took two patterned strips here. So this one's a larger, and then this one here, and they are from the same pad, so they coordinate beautifully. And I think that you can mix patterns that way pretty easily. And then I had this square element from the Ephemera pack, which I wanted it to stand out from the patterns below, and that's why I have this square behind. And then my focal image, and then to balance that, because it's way over here on the left, I've got my sentiment here on the right, and it just says hi. Now these two, I just came up with this scheme on my own, so I didn't use a sketch, but I've used this technique before, and it's a great way if you have tags in your Ephemera pack or your cut-aparts, because sometimes it's like, well, what do I do with a tag? I love the tag, but what do I do with it? And it's sort of the same technique as that askew rectangle sketch where I mentioned that I would have a pattern that has more of a focal image, and then I take a more subtle pattern and put it behind. And so that's what I was looking for with the tags, is this one's the more focal image and this one's kind of the more background one, and they're similar in size but not the same, but it works. And so this one goes behind and this one comes out, and you can have it be the focal one on top here and the pattern behind here. You can totally vary all of that. And then I think there was something, I don't even remember what was on this tag, but it was a sentiment actually. It had a word on there which didn't quite go with what I wanted my card to say, so I just covered it up with this scrap. And then I've added, since there's gold in my pattern background paper and kind of a gold shimmer here, I went with gold sentiments here, happy, then the birthday's there, and just added a little something there. There's a lot going on with patterns and things on this card, but I think it works. And then, so you kind of want somewhere, you want an anchor. Like these two, I felt like wouldn't be enough by themselves. So that's what these papers here are doing, is kind of an anchor, a landing place for the focal point. Now this one, they're kind of floating out there in the ether, but we have the balance here coming on this side of the card, and it doesn't look like it's just all by itself. Like, can you imagine if this wasn't here? It wouldn't seem balanced. There'd be too much down here, and so that's where I've got the balance. This is slightly to the right, and that's why I've placed the anchoring balance section down here on the left. And then again, we have a pattern, and then this one has kind of more of a focal point. Counting my blessings, I thought, love you was a good sentiment to go with that, and that's how. It's a great way to resource. You maybe you want to sketch this idea out if you've had tags, and this works in journals too as a focal point. If you wanted to use them in the corner of the journal and use two tags, you use the more plain one behind and the sentiment or the focal one in front, and it's a great way to use those tag pieces. So these three, I'm not even sure if I can think of a theme for these. They don't all go together, but there is sort of a similar function in that they have the sentiment down here and kind of focal images up here. So maybe they're, showing all the different ideas. So on this one, I put the sentiment down here, but then I was like, oh, this is all by itself up here. And so I used some of these little stickers to add some balance up there, and you could use little color dots, whatever, maybe a smaller flower image. There's a lot of different ways, and so that's one example there. And then this one, the showpiece, I think what I started with was this. I wanted to use this, and it's so big, it's taking up a lot of the space. I didn't want to do too much, and I just thought a sentiment down here would balance it, and then this is pretty. And the other thing is their layering is also a technique to connect different elements. So this piece is touching each of these, and it kind of makes your eye want to follow that thread. So that's another technique that I use a lot, is layering. Here's another one. We could have something peeking behind there. I didn't do it for this card, and you just have, this one's pretty simple. Celebrate, we have the focal point, we have the word there, and then those are those three. On to the final two here. I had kind of a mishmash of pieces. Now these ones, the only thing they really have in common is kind of collaging elements. When you have a lot of small pieces, you can bring them together in collage, and that's where we're gonna use that layering technique that I just mentioned, and hopefully it'll make a little more sense here, because in order to have them feel like a one piece connected, have a unity, you want them to be one, you know, color harmony, go together in color, but also you can make them go together by having them touch each other, like, and going off the edges. And so in this one, the focal point here is in the center, and I've brought the attention to it more with a little dimension. And I have these two pieces, and it's touching them, and it's also touching this, so it's all kind of one piece, yet it's balanced. It's equally on either side. And then I just have the sentiment here, and I have repeated the corner rounding element, so repeated elements. There's a lot going on in this card also, and another technique in the card making is if you don't have a background paper, like if it just seems the craft is just a little too plain by itself, sometimes those subtle embossing folders are just what you need, and I absolutely love the Swiss dots. That one's like, it's just gives a little something, a little more texture without being too much. And so that one's a great one for if you feel like it's a little too plain by itself, but it'd be too much with a pattern. Swiss dot, I love that folder. And then here on this one we have, I liked this image so much, and that's what I wanted to use, but it was just too small by itself. And I thought, well, how can I make this more of a focal point on an A2 size card? And that's where I found this coordinating piece of paper, and I tore the edge here because it was a little bit longer, I think, but I like how that it repeats this kind of off-white color here and here. And since I was going with the blue, then I wanted to pull other colors from this image, and so I went with the blue hearts to balance these sides. And then this is green, there's a lot of green in there, and the green here, and the blue, and then pink and pink. So you see all the different repeated color choices in the elements there. Repetition, layering, that's great for collage. So these are the final two cards, and let's have a look at all the cards, all 15 cards in all their beautiful variety. At all 15 cards and all the different ways of working with the card sketch and the themes of color harmony, visual balance, and focal point message. I hope this gives you a great idea for how to build a greeting card and different ideas and inspiration for how to use those paper pads, coordinated, and ephemera. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, have a wonderful and creative day.